After months of being mocked for my useless job, Dad told me, starting next month, you'll pay to live here. I smiled, packed my car, and left without a word. The following week, I got a text from Mom, the mortgage is due, where are you? My name is Jessica, and this is the story of how my family's constant mockery of my career choice came back to bite them in the most spectacular way possible. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 26 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been working as a freelance digital marketing consultant. It's not the most glamorous job title, and it certainly doesn't sound impressive at family gatherings when your dad is a construction foreman and your older brother Marcus works as an auto mechanic. But what they never understood was that my useless job, as they love to call it, was bringing in around $120,000 annually. Living at home after college wasn't my first choice, but it made financial sense at the time. I was paying off student loans, building my client base, and saving money for my own place. My parents, Richard and Linda, seemed fine with the arrangement initially. They charged me $400 a month for rent, which was incredibly cheap compared to apartment prices in our area. I thought it was a fair deal. I got a roof over my head, and they got some extra income. The problem started about 6 months ago when my business really began to take off. I was working from home, often in my pajamas, typing away on my laptop at the kitchen table. To my family, this didn't look like real work. They'd make snide comments about how I was playing on the computer all day or ask when I was going to get a real job like Marcus. My dad was the worst offender. Richard had worked construction his entire life, leaving the house before dawn and coming home exhausted and covered in dirt. In his mind, if you weren't breaking your back for a paycheck, you weren't really working. He'd walk past me at my laptop and mutter things like, "Must be nice to sit around all day," or "When I was your age, I knew what real work looked like." The mockery intensified when I started making more money. I bought myself a nice car, a certified pre-owned BMW that I'd saved months for. Richard nearly had an aneurysm when I pulled into the driveway with it. "How the hell can you afford that thing with your little computer games?" he demanded. I tried to explain that digital marketing was a legitimate, profitable business, but he waved me off. "You're probably just racking up debt trying to look successful," he said. "That's what your generation does, all flash, no substance." Marcus wasn't much better. He'd bring his mechanic friends over, and they'd joke about my pretend job right in front of me. One particularly memorable evening, his friend Danny looked at me working on a client campaign and said, "Hey Jessica, when you're done playing on Facebook, can you get us some beers?" The whole table erupted in laughter. I smiled politely and retreated to my room, but inside, I was seething. My mom, Linda, was more subtle in her disapproval but equally dismissive. She'd introduce me to her friends as Jessica, our daughter who does something with computers. When I tried to explain what digital marketing actually involved, strategy development, content creation, data analysis, campaign management, her eyes would glaze over. The breaking point came 3 months ago. I had just landed my biggest client yet, a regional restaurant chain that wanted to revamp their entire online presence. The contract was worth $80,000 over 6 months, which would bring my annual income to well over 6 figures. I was excited and wanted to share the news with my family. Big mistake. $80,000? Richard laughed so hard he nearly choked on his beer. For what, making Facebook posts? Come on, Jess, quit pulling our legs. When I showed him the signed contract, his laughter died, but his skepticism didn't. "This has got to be some kind of scam," he said, studying the document. "Nobody pays that kind of money for playing on the internet." Marcus chimed in from the couch. "Dad's right. You're probably getting catfished by some Nigerian prince who's going to steal your identity." Even when I explained that the client was a legitimate business with locations throughout the state, they remained convinced I was either lying or being duped. The constant doubt and ridicule were wearing me down, but I thought things might improve once they saw the money actually coming in. Instead, they got worse. As my bank account grew, so did their resentment. Richard started making comments about how I was living off them while making fake money. He'd complain about the electricity bills, claiming my laptop was driving up costs. He'd grumble about the space I took up in the house, even though I only used my bedroom and occasionally the kitchen table. The final straw came 2 weeks ago. I was in the middle of a video conference with my restaurant client, discussing their holiday marketing strategy. It was an important call that could lead to an extension of our contract. I was dressed professionally from the waist up, presenting campaign analytics and discussing ROI metrics. My dad chose that moment to storm into the kitchen, grab a beer from the fridge, and announce loudly, "Oh, excuse me, Your Majesty. Don't let me interrupt your very important pretend meeting." I muted my microphone, but I could see my client's confused expression on screen. I had to excuse myself, reschedule the call, and spend the rest of the day doing damage control. Thankfully, the client was understanding, but I was mortified. That evening, I confronted Richard about his behavior. "Dad, what you did today was completely unprofessional and embarrassing. This is my livelihood you're mocking." He rolled his eyes. Livelihood? Jessica, you play games on a computer. Stop acting like you're running General Motors. I made more money last month than you make in 3 months, I said quietly. His face turned red. Is that so? Well, if you're making so much money with your little hobby, maybe it's time you started contributing more around here. Or better yet, maybe it's time you found your own place. Linda jumped in. Richard, she pays rent? $400? He scoffed. That's nothing. If she's really making the kind of money she claims, she should be paying market rate. Or she can find somewhere else to live. I took a deep breath. What exactly are you proposing? Starting next month, you pay $1,500 if you want to keep living here. That's what a real tenant would pay for a room in this area. I had to admit, he wasn't wrong about the market rate. But the way he said it, the smugness in his voice, made it clear this wasn't about fair rent. This was about putting me in my place, proving that my job wasn't as successful as I claimed. Marcus laughed from the living room. Bet she can't afford it. All that computer money is probably gone as fast as it came. I looked at my family, my father with his arms crossed and his chin jutted out defiantly, my mother looking uncomfortable but not contradicting him, my brother smirking from the couch. In that moment, something clicked for me. I smiled. You know what, Dad? You're absolutely right. If I'm going to pay $1,500 a month for housing, I should probably look at all my options. He looked surprised by my calm response. I think he expected me to argue or beg for the old arrangement. So you'll pay it? He asked. I'll definitely look into it, I said. Give me a week to figure out my budget. That night, I started apartment hunting. Not because I couldn't afford to pay my dad $1,500, I could have paid it easily, but because I was done. Done with the disrespect, done with the mockery, done with being treated like a freeloader in my own family home. What my family didn't know was that my useless job had been funding more than just my car and personal expenses. For the past year, I'd been quietly helping with household bills. When Linda mentioned struggling to pay the electric bill last winter, I'd anonymously paid it. When Richard's truck needed expensive repairs that he couldn't quite afford, I'd slipped money into my mom's purse with a note saying it was from her emergency savings. Most significantly, I'd been contributing to the mortgage. My parents had refinanced their house 2 years ago to pay for Marcus's wedding and some major home repairs. The new payment was steep, $2,800 a month, and they were stretching to make ends meet. 6 months ago, when Linda was crying over the kitchen table about possibly losing the house, I'd started making anonymous payments to their mortgage company. I'd been paying half their mortgage, $1,400 a month, without them knowing. I set it up to look like it was coming from an escrow account error correction, so they just thought they were catching up on some kind of banking mistake. Every month, they celebrated their good luck at being $1,400 ahead on their payments. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father wanted me to pay $1,500 in rent, which was almost exactly what I was secretly contributing to keep a roof over all our heads. As I looked at apartment listings that week, I felt a mixture of excitement and sadness. Excitement for my independence, sadness that it had come to this. I found a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a trendy part of downtown, hardwood floors, updated kitchen, rooftop deck access. The rent was $1,800, which I could afford easily. I scheduled a viewing for Thursday, filled out the application that same day, and was approved by Friday. The landlord was impressed by my credit score and income verification. Turns out, having a useless job that pays 6 figures makes you a very attractive tenant. While I was apartment hunting, life at home continued its usual pattern. Richard made his daily comments about my work, Marcus brought his friends over to mock my career, and Linda stayed quietly disapproving. None of them asked about my housing decision or seemed particularly concerned about my upcoming rent increase. Friday night, Marcus had his usual crew over to watch football. As I sat at the kitchen table working on a client presentation, Danny, the same friend who'd made the Facebook comment, decided to provide entertainment for the group. Hey Jessica, he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, my mom needs help posting pictures on Instagram. You think you could help her out? She can pay you in cookies instead of your usual fake money. The room erupted in laughter. Richard was practically slapping his knee, and even Linda chuckled from the kitchen. That's when I made my decision. I closed my laptop, smiled at the room full of people mocking my livelihood, and said, you know what, Danny? I think I'm going to be too busy to help. I've got a lot of packing to do. The laughter died down. Richard looked up from his beer. Packing? Oh, didn't I mention? I found a great apartment downtown. I'll be moving out Sunday. You could have heard a pin drop. Linda was the first to speak. Sunday? This Sunday? That's only 2 days away. I nodded cheerfully. The landlord had a cancellation, so I was able to move my start date up. Lucky me. Richard's face was cycling through several emotions. What about the rent we discussed? Oh, I decided you were right. If I'm going to pay $1,500 a month, I might as well get my own place. Actually, the apartment I found is $1,800, but it's got much better amenities than here. 2 bedrooms, rooftop access, in-unit laundry, the kind of place someone with a successful career can afford. The room was dead silent. Marcus's friends were staring at their hands, suddenly uncomfortable. Marcus himself looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. Besides, I continued, standing up and stretching, I think it'll be better for everyone. You won't have to listen to my important pretend meetings anymore, Dad. And Marcus, you and your friends won't have to worry about being interrupted by my computer games. Linda looked panicked. Jessica, honey, don't you think you're being a little hasty? Maybe we can work something out. Mom, it's fine, I said, patting her shoulder. Dad made it very clear how he feels about my living situation. I'm just following his advice. I headed toward my room, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and don't worry about helping me move. I'm hiring professional movers. I can afford it with all that fake money I've been making. That weekend was a whirlwind of activity. The movers I hired were efficient and professional. Another perk of having a successful business is being able to afford quality services. They packed everything in my room, loaded it up, and transported it to my new apartment in a matter of hours. My family watched the process with varying degrees of disbelief. Linda kept hovering around, asking if I was sure about this decision. Richard tried to maintain his stubborn facade, but I could see uncertainty creeping in. Marcus stayed in his room most of the time, avoiding the situation entirely. As the movers loaded the last box into their truck, Linda pulled me aside. Honey, this seems so sudden. Are you sure you can afford this place? Maybe your father was too harsh with a rent increase, but, Mom, I interrupted gently, I can afford it. I know you all think my job isn't real, but I promise you, the money I make is very real. She looked at me with something that might have been the first glimmer of understanding. How much do you really make, Jessica? Enough, I said. More than enough. Richard chose that moment to make his appearance. He walked up to us with his chest puffed out, trying to project confidence, but I could see the worry in his eyes. So you're really doing this? He said. I am. And you think you can make it on your own with your little computer job? I guess we'll find out, I said pleasantly. He seemed to want to say more, but couldn't find the words. Finally, he just nodded curtly and walked back into the house. I hugged my mom goodbye, waved to Marcus who was watching from his bedroom window, and climbed into my BMW. As I drove away from the house I'd lived in for 3 years, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, excitement, sadness, and yes, a little bit of anticipation for what was coming next. My new apartment was everything I'd hoped for. The natural light was incredible, the kitchen was perfect for the cooking I loved to do, and having my own space felt like a luxury I hadn't realized I was missing. I spent Sunday night setting up my home office in the 2nd bedroom, hanging up my business degree and various professional certifications, accomplishments my family had never shown interest in. Monday morning, I called the mortgage company for my new kitchen while sipping coffee and looking out at the city skyline. The conversation was brief and professional. Hi, I need to cancel an automatic payment I've been making on account number. I gave them my parents' mortgage account number. Let me pull that up, the representative said. I see you've been making payments of $1,400 monthly. Can I ask a reason for the cancellation? I'm moving out of the property, I said simply. I understand. The cancellation will be effective immediately. The account holder will need to resume full payment responsibility starting with next month's billing cycle. Perfect. Thank you. After I hung up, I sat in my beautiful new kitchen and waited. The week passed peacefully. I threw myself into my work, landing 2 new clients and expanding my contract with the restaurant chain. Without the constant negativity from my family, my creativity and productivity soared. I found myself working better than I had in months. The silence from home was both liberating and unsettling. For 3 years, I'd been accustomed to the constant background noise of disapproval, Richard's grumbling about my work schedule, Marcus's friends making jokes, Linda's subtle sighs of disappointment. Now, in my quiet apartment with only the gentle hum of city traffic below, I could actually think clearly. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected breakthrough with a new client. I'd been pitching to a mid-sized law firm that wanted to modernize their online presence. During our video conference, the managing partner, Robert Harrison, mentioned how impressed he was with my presentation materials and strategic approach. I have to ask, he said, leaning forward on screen, where did you get your training? This level of analysis usually comes from someone with years of agency experience. I explained my background, my marketing degree, various certifications, and 3 years of building my practice from scratch. What I didn't mention was that much of my learning had happened at that kitchen table while my family mocked me in the background. Remarkable, Robert said. We'd like to move forward with a 12-month contract. The budget is $120,000. After the call ended, I sat in my new office space, staring at the contract details on my screen. $120,000. More than double what my father made in a year, and this was just one client among several. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. Wednesday evening, I decided to treat myself to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. As I sat at the bar waiting for my table, I overheard a conversation between two women discussing their adult children living at home. "I don't understand this generation," one was saying. "My daughter graduated 2 years ago and she's still in her childhood bedroom, claiming she's building her business. What kind of business can you run from your parents' house?" Her friend nodded sympathetically. "At least your daughter pays rent. My son thinks free room and board is his birthright while he finds himself with his photography hobby." I almost laughed out loud. Here I was, dining alone at a restaurant where entrees cost more than what I used to pay in weekly rent, while these women complained about children who sounded exactly like what my family thought I was. The hostess called my name, and I was seated at a lovely table by the window. As I enjoyed my meal, a perfectly prepared salmon with truffle risotto, I couldn't help but think about how different my evening routine had become. Instead of eating reheated leftovers while listening to complaints about my work, I was savoring excellent food in peaceful solitude, planning my next business moves. Thursday brought another reminder of how much my life had changed. My neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, knocked on my door around lunchtime. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I've been hearing you on work calls, and I wondered if you might be able to help me with something." She explained that she owned a small import business specializing in handmade crafts from China, but she'd never had any online presence. Her grandson had set up a basic website years ago, but she had no idea how to use social media or online advertising. "I can pay you," she said earnestly. "Business has been slow since the pandemic, but I have some savings." I spent an hour talking with Mrs. Chen about her business, looking at her beautiful inventory of hand-carved figurines, silk scarves, and traditional artwork. Her passion for the crafts and their cultural significance was evident in every piece she showed me. "Mrs. Chen," I said finally, "I'd love to help you, but not for payment. Consider it a neighborly favor." Her eyes widened. "Oh no, I couldn't ask you to work for free." "You're not asking, I'm offering. Besides, I think your products would photograph beautifully for social media." Over the next few hours, I helped her set up Instagram and Facebook business accounts, took professional quality photos of her merchandise, and created her first few posts. Watching her face light up as orders started coming in within hours was worth more than any payment. "You're a magician," she said, clasping my hands. "How did you learn to do this?" "Practice," I said simply. "Lots of practice." As she left my apartment with printed instructions for managing her new accounts, I realized this was the first time in months someone had asked about my work with genuine curiosity rather than skepticism. Mrs. Chen saw the value in what I did because she experienced the results firsthand. That evening, I found myself wondering what my family was doing. Were they sitting around the dinner table, discussing their day? Was Richard complaining about his back? Was Marcus planning another evening with his friends? Was Linda worrying about bills? For a moment, I felt a pang of loneliness. Despite everything, these were my people. I'd grown up in that house, learned to drive in that driveway, celebrated birthdays around that kitchen table. The memories weren't all bad, there had been good times mixed in with the recent frustrations. But then I remembered the look on Richard's face when he dismissed my biggest contract as a scam. I remembered Danny's laughter when he compared my work to playing on Facebook. I remembered the constant undercurrent of disrespect that had colored every interaction about my career. No, I told myself firmly. I'd made the right choice. Love didn't mean accepting disrespect, and family didn't give anyone the right to diminish your accomplishments. Friday morning arrived with an interesting email. Jennifer Martinez, the marketing director for the restaurant chain I'd been working with, wanted to schedule a call to discuss expanding our partnership. "Jessica," she said during our video conference, "the holiday campaign results exceeded all our expectations. Revenue is up 37% compared to last year, and our online engagement has tripled. The board wants to know if you'd be interested in a long-term partnership." She outlined their proposal, a 2-year contract worth $400,000, with the possibility of extending to cover their planned expansion into 3 new states. "We've been so impressed with your work that we're also interested in having you consult on our acquisition strategy," Jennifer continued. "We're looking at purchasing 2 smaller restaurant groups, and we'd want your input on their digital assets and online market position." After the call, I sat back in my chair, slightly overwhelmed. $400,000 over 2 years, plus additional consulting fees. My useless job was rapidly becoming more lucrative than most traditional careers. I was in the middle of reviewing the contract details when my phone buzzed with a text message. I ignored it, focusing on the presentation I was giving about social media strategy and brand positioning. The call went well, another contract worth $50,000 over 4 months. After the call ended, I checked my phone. The message was from my mom. "The mortgage is due, where are you?" I ignored it, focusing on the presentation I was giving about social media strategy and brand positioning. The call went well, another contract worth $50,000 over 4 months. After the call ended, I checked my phone. The message was from my mom. "The mortgage is due, where are you?" I stared at the text for a long moment, then set my phone down and made myself another cup of coffee. I'd been expecting this, but seeing it in writing still gave me a little thrill of vindication. My phone rang almost immediately. Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Hi Mom," I answered. "Jessica, honey, where are you? We need to talk." "I'm at my apartment. You know, the one I moved to on Sunday. Can you come home? Please. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" There was a pause, then Linda's voice came back, smaller and more uncertain. "The mortgage company called. They said our payment arrangement changed, and we owe the full amount this month. But that doesn't make sense, we've been ahead on payments for months." "That does sound confusing," I said neutrally. "Richard thinks there might be some kind of banking error, but they're insisting we owe $2,800 by next Friday or we'll be in default." $2,800? I repeated. "That's a lot of money." "We don't have it," Linda said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Your father's been out of work for 2 weeks with his back injury, and I'm only part-time at the store. We've been counting on those reduced payments to make ends meet." My father had hurt his back? This was the first I was hearing about it. Not that I was surprised, my family wasn't in the habit of sharing important information with me. "I'm sorry to hear about Dad's back," I said. "But I'm not sure how I can help. Could you loan us some money? Just until Richard gets back to work?" I was quiet for a moment, considering my response. "Mom, I thought my money was fake. I thought my job was just playing computer games." Another pause. Then, very quietly, "We may have been wrong about that." "May have been?" She corrected quickly. "We were wrong. Your father wants to talk to you. Can you please come over?" "I'll think about it," I said. "I've got a busy day ahead of me. You know, with my pretend job and all." I hung up and went back to work, but I'll admit, concentrating was difficult. Part of me felt guilty, these were my parents, after all, and they were in real financial trouble. But the larger part of me remembered months of mockery, dismissiveness, and disrespect. They'd made their position on my career and my worth very clear. My phone continued to ring throughout the day. Linda called 3 more times, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Marcus called twice, the first time I'd heard from him since I'd moved out. Even Richard called once, though he didn't leave a message. That evening, around 6 o'clock, there was a knock at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother standing in the hallway, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her. I opened the door. "Hi, Mom." "Jessica, thank God. Can I come in?" I stepped aside and she entered my apartment, looking around with wide eyes. The difference between my new place and my childhood bedroom was stark. This was clearly the home of a successful adult, not someone playing pretend games on a computer. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "And expensive." "The rent is $1,800 a month," I confirmed. She winced. "How can you afford this?" I gestured for her to sit on my couch. "Would you like some wine? I've got a nice bottle I was saving for a special occasion." "Jessica, we need to talk seriously." "I know. That's why I'm opening the wine." I poured 2 glasses of a $60 Cabernet, another purchase my family would have mocked as pretentious. Linda accepted her glass with shaking hands. "Your father is beside himself," she began. "He can't understand where the mortgage money went. We've been making reduced payments for months, and suddenly they want the full amount." "That does sound stressful," I said, settling into my armchair. Linda studied my face. "You don't seem surprised." "Should I be?" "Jessica." Her voice was sharp now. "Do you know something about this?" I sipped my wine, considering how much to reveal. "What do you think I know?" "I think you've been helping us financially, and we didn't know it." I raised my eyebrows. "That's quite an assumption. Why would you think that?" "Because you're the only person I know who could afford to pay $1,400 a month and not miss it. And because..." She paused, looking ashamed. "Because you're a better person than we've been treating you like." Finally. Recognition. "You're right," I said simply. "I have been helping." Linda closed her eyes. "For how long?" 6 months for the mortgage. Longer for other bills." "How much?" "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said, opening her eyes and looking directly at me. "It matters because we need to know how badly we screwed up." I got up and retrieved a folder from my home office, meticulous records of every payment I'd made on my family's behalf. I handed it to Linda and watched her face as she flipped through bank statements and receipts. Her face went white. "Jessica, this is thousands of dollars." $14,800 to be exact, I said. Not counting the electric bill, the truck repair, or the groceries I bought when I knew you were struggling. Linda's hands were shaking as she closed the folder. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? Would you have accepted it? Or would you have found another way to mock my fake computer money? She was quiet for a long time. Finally, we would have mocked you. God help us, we would have said you were showing off or trying to buy our approval. Probably. And now? Now you need my help, and suddenly my computer games don't seem so useless. Linda started crying then, quiet, ashamed tears. We were horrible to you. Your father, Marcus, me. We were all horrible. And you were taking care of us anyway. I love you, I said. All of you, despite everything. But love doesn't mean I have to accept disrespect. What can we do? She asked. How can we fix this? I don't know if you can, I said honestly. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight. But the mortgage, we'll get paid, I interrupted. I'm not going to let you lose your house, Mom. But things are going to be different now. Linda looked up at me with hope and relief. Different how? First, the mockery stops. Completely. From everyone. I don't want to hear one more comment about my job being fake or useless or pretend. My work is legitimate, profitable, and professional, and it will be treated as such. She nodded eagerly. Of course, absolutely. Second, if I'm going to help financially, everyone needs to acknowledge that help and be grateful for it. No more pretending it's anonymous or mysterious. No more lucky breaks on the mortgage. Yes, that's fair. Third, I want a real apology from Dad and Marcus. Not just we are sorry, but an acknowledgement of exactly what they did wrong and how it affected me. Linda wiped her eyes. I'll make sure they understand. And finally, I said, leaning forward, if anyone in this family ever treats me with such disrespect again, I'm done. Completely done. No more help, no more family dinners, no more relationship at all. This is the only second chance anyone gets. I understand, Linda said. And Jessica? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You deserve better from all of us. I felt something tight in my chest finally loosen. Thank you. That means a lot. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping wine and processing the conversation. Finally, Linda asked, so what happens now? Now you go home and have a family meeting, I said. You explain the situation to Dad and Marcus. Make sure they understand that their attitude toward me and my career was not only wrong but financially costly. Then, if they're genuinely sorry and willing to change, we can discuss how to move forward. And the mortgage payment? I'll take care of it. But Linda, I looked at her seriously, this is a loan, not a gift. You'll pay me back when Dad returns to work. Of course. Yes. Whatever you want. After my mother left, I sat in my apartment feeling emotionally drained but oddly satisfied. The revenge hadn't been elaborate or dramatic, it was simple cause and effect. They'd rejected my contributions, so I'd stopped contributing. They dismissed my financial success, so they'd lost access to it. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is just letting people experience the consequences of their own actions. 2 days later, Richard and Marcus showed up at my apartment together. Richard looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week, and Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. We need to talk, Richard said when I opened the door. I figured you'd come by eventually. I let them in, noting how they both looked around my apartment with new understanding. This wasn't the home of someone playing pretend, this was the home of someone who had genuinely made it. Richard sat heavily on my couch. Your mother told us what you've been doing. The mortgage payments, the bills. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I don't know what to say. An apology would be a good start, I suggested. He looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in my father's eyes before, genuine remorse. I'm sorry, Jessica. I'm sorry for mocking your work, for dismissing your success, for treating you like you were worthless. I was wrong about everything. Marcus finally spoke up. Me too. I was a complete asshole. You were making more money than both of us combined, and we were too stupid and jealous to see it. Jealous? I asked. Marcus nodded miserably. Yeah, jealous. You figured out how to make a great living doing something you love, from home, on your own terms. Meanwhile, I'm breaking my back in a garage for half what you make, and Dad's destroying his body on construction sites. We should have been proud of you, but instead we felt threatened. Richard nodded in agreement. I've worked construction for 30 years, and I've got nothing to show for it but a bad back and a mortgage I can't afford. You're 26 and you're more successful than I've ever been. That's hard for a father to swallow. So you decided to tear me down instead of celebrating my success, I said. Yes, Richard said simply. And that makes me a terrible father. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness or excuses, but this raw admission of his failures was something I hadn't anticipated. I've been thinking a lot this week, he continued. About all the times I interrupted your work, all the comments I made, all the ways I tried to make you feel small. And I realized something: I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that you didn't need us anymore. Scared that you'd grown beyond your family. Scared that once you realized how successful you could be, you'd leave us behind. He looked at me with eyes full of pain. Turns out I was right to be scared, but for all the wrong reasons. I felt tears pricking my eyes. This was the most honest conversation I'd ever had with my father. Dad, I never wanted to leave you behind. I wanted you to be proud of me. I wanted you to see that I'd found something I was good at, something that could provide a good life. Instead, you made me feel like I had to hide my success or apologize for it. I know, he said quietly. And I'm sorry for that most of all. We talked for 2 more hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time in years. Richard told me about his struggles with feeling obsolete in a changing economy, about his fear of retirement with no savings, about his pride that had kept him from asking for help. Marcus opened up about his own insecurities and how my success had made him question his own life choices. By the end of the conversation, we'd established a new understanding. I would continue to help with the mortgage, not secretly, but as a recognized family contribution. In return, my work would be respected and my success celebrated. Most importantly, we would communicate honestly about problems instead of letting resentment build. 6 months later, I'm sitting in that same apartment, but everything has changed. My business has grown to the point where I'm considering hiring employees. I've been featured in a local business magazine as one of the city's 30 under 30 rising entrepreneurs. And my family has become my biggest supporters. Richard brags about my success to anyone who will listen. He's learned enough about digital marketing to actually understand what I do, and he sent me 3 referrals from people in the construction industry who need help with their online presence. Marcus has started asking me for advice about marketing his mechanic shop, and he's seeing real results from the strategies I've shared. Linda calls every week to check in, not to ask for money or complain about bills, but just to see how I'm doing. Last month, she asked if I'd be willing to teach her how to use social media to promote her part-time job at the boutique. The mortgage situation stabilized once Richard returned to work, and they're now paying me back $50 a week, a small amount that fits their budget and will eventually repay the loan. More importantly, they're building up their own emergency funds so they won't be caught off guard by financial problems again. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled the situation. Sometimes people need to experience consequences before they can recognize their mistakes. Sometimes you have to withdraw your support before others can appreciate its value. And sometimes the most effective revenge is simply letting people see who they really are when they don't have you to blame anymore. My useless job now supports not just my own comfortable lifestyle, but provides security and opportunities for my entire family. The difference is that now they see it, acknowledge it, and respect it. And that makes all the difference in the world.